Chosen ones, heaven cannot withhold this from you any longer. The unveiling is here. Right now, a sacred shift is erupting in the unseen, and you stand at the heart of it. This is no small moment. It is a divine announcement, an emergency transmission from the throne itself. Something mighty is breaking into your life, and it has been written for you since before time. Pause. Lean in. The changes you are about to witness will exceed every prayer, every hope, every dream you've carried in silence. For years, God has been dropping clues, through visions, through alignments, through whispers that pierced the noise of your life. That inner stirring you've wrestled with was never random. It was preparation. The stage has been set. A door has been carved in the spirit, and only your hand can open it. This is not chance. This is your divine appointment, and it is opening now. If this message already speaks to your soul, subscribe, like this video, and comment 77 below. They thought your silence was weakness. They laughed at the way you pulled away. But what they did not know is that silence is where heaven writes its loudest decrees. And today, I am going to reveal why your hidden seasons were never punishment, but preparation. And why the unveiling of your silent crown is about to shake everything around you. Number 1. The hidden shield of silence. Chosen one, silence was never absence, it was protection. While others clamored for attention, heaven wrapped you in stillness as a shield. Job once said, "When his lamp shone on my head, and by his light I walked through darkness." That is what happened to you. God hid you not to strip you of power, but to preserve it until the appointed time. They thought you were being left behind, but every quiet year was sharpening your discernment. When they underestimated you, silence was sharpening the sword of your words, so that when you spoke, it would cut deeper than noise ever could. Comment shield if you know silence has been your protection. What they mistook for weakness will soon reveal itself as your weapon. And this weapon terrifies them more than anything you could have said out loud. A dream lingers at the edge of your memory, a dream where you walked through a crowded room, yet no one turned their head, as if you were covered by a veil only heaven could see. You wondered why you were overlooked, why your presence was dimmed, why your voice seemed to echo in chambers where no ears listened. It was not rejection, but preservation, a mystery written into your journey before you understood its meaning. There was a hand upon your life, quiet but firm, guiding you through corridors of shadow where noise could not follow. The silence you carried was not emptiness, but a cloak of hidden fire, burning invisibly so that its flame could not be stolen too soon. You thought you were forgotten, but you were hidden in plain sight, carried beneath the lamp of God's timing. And now, as you remember this dream, you recognize that silence was never an accident. It was the first layer of your protection. There were seasons when you longed for validation, yet the doors remained closed. You watched others praised for their noise, while your whispers seemed to vanish into the air. You tried to explain the depth you felt inside, but language failed you, and misunderstanding wrapped around your words like chains. Loneliness pressed on you, not because you lacked worth, but because you were tuned to a frequency too rare for most to hear. Nights became heavy with questions. Mornings arrived without clear answers, and still you carried the strange ache of being different. Tears came not only from pain, but from a hunger for meaning, a hunger you could not name. Yet even in this, silence was your unseen teacher, molding you with patient hands. What you once called isolation was never wasted time, but divine design. Every unanswered prayer, every friendship that drifted, every opportunity that passed you by was a piece of architecture shaped by unseen hands. You were being written into a greater pattern, one that could only be revealed when the moment was ripe. Just as Joseph was thrown into a pit only to rise into a palace, your stillness was an antechamber to destiny. The absence of recognition was not punishment, but a signpost pointing you inward, teaching you to find in God what you could not find in applause. Your silence was not a blank page, but scripture in progress, unfolding line by line. And when you begin to see it this way, your past becomes prophecy fulfilled. Think back to the subtle signs that stirred around you, the dream that returned again and again, the sudden stillness before a major shift, the uncanny sense that something invisible walked with you. There were moments when time itself felt suspended, when a sentence overheard struck you as though heaven itself had spoken. Perhaps you felt chills at words no one else noticed, or a strange peace when the world expected you to panic. These were not accidents, but confirmations that silence was more alive than sound. The quiet became an altar where the spirit left footprints, soft enough to miss but undeniable once seen. Every shiver of recognition, every déjà vu, was heaven leaning in to whisper, "You are not abandoned, you are being prepared," and the signs were always closer than you imagined. You may have doubted your intuition, wondering if you had made it all up. But what you called imagination was often revelation wearing a thin disguise. When your heart said, "Wait," and you obeyed, you later saw why it was wise. When your spirit felt unrest in a place that seemed safe to others, you discovered the danger hidden there. Your silence was a compass, pointing you away from traps and into the open paths of divine timing. You were not delusional, you were aligned, though alignment often felt like exile. As Isaiah promised, "In quietness and trust is your strength," and that trust has been guiding you all along. Your inner knowing was not error. It was the lamp shining on your head in the darkness. To awaken is not to become something new, but to remember what was buried. Beneath layers of self-doubt, beneath wounds of rejection, lies the ancient identity that silence kept safe. You were not being stripped of voice, you were being reminded of origin. Silence was chiseling away the noise so that your true name, written before the foundations of the earth, could rise. Every moment of invisibility was a sacred excavation, uncovering the jewel beneath the dust. This is why the world could not define you, because it never gave you what you carried. You are not discovering yourself, you are remembering yourself. And now the first activation stirs. What once felt like burden is revealed as gift, and what once felt like exile is seen as refuge. Your sensitivity, your longing for meaning, your refusal to drown in shallow waters. These were never flaws, but signals that you were set apart. To embrace them is to step into the authority silence has prepared within you. The fire hidden in stillness is now rising, and though the world may not yet understand, heaven already crowns it. This awareness is your threshold, the moment where the shield becomes a weapon. And with each breath, you are stepping further into the alignment prepared for you all along. So hear this closing whisper. You did not stumble onto this message. It was waiting for you, sealed until you were ready to hear. The same silence that once felt unbearable has brought you here, to this very moment of recognition. Your story was never chaos. It was orchestration, written by hands that see beyond time. Rest in this, for the unveiling has only just begun, and what comes next will unfold like dawn breaking after a long night. Comment shield if silence has been your unseen protection, guarding you when nothing else could. And prepare yourself, because the shield you carried in secret is about to shine in the open. The silence is over, and the revelation has begun. What we do here every day is possible because of the few who choose to be keepers of this light. I thank them now, one by one, in the silence of my heart. If you want to be part of this circle and receive what cannot be spoken in public, join. The portal is below. Number 2. When silence terrified your enemies. Chosen one, what unsettled them most was not your words, but your quiet. They expected you to argue, to defend yourself, to fight back in noise, but you didn't. And in your stillness, their own shadows rose against them. Isaiah declared, "In quietness and trust is your strength." Your silence became prophecy they couldn't interpret, and that shook them. They whispered about you because they couldn't control you. They invented stories because they could not read you. Every time you walked away instead of engaging, it was as though heaven itself had turned its face and left them exposed. Comment crown if you've ever seen people grow uneasy when you said nothing at all. And yet, what they feared in secret was that your silence meant you were listening to something higher, and they were right. There are moments in your life when the air around you felt heavy, as if eyes were watching you even in the quiet corners of your existence. You noticed how conversations stopped when you entered the room, how glances carried questions they never spoke aloud. Something within you sensed that resistance was already moving against you long before you understood why. It wasn't about anything you said, because often you said nothing at all. It was about the strange weight of your presence, the silence you carried that unsettled what was hidden in others. That quiet became a mirror, reflecting truths they weren't ready to face. And without realizing it, you had already stepped into a conflict you did not choose but were born into. The weight of this conflict often pressed against your chest in the form of loneliness, rejection, or confusion. You may remember times when people withdrew from you, not because of anything you did, but because they felt something they could not explain. It left you questioning yourself, wondering if you were too much, too strange, or too different to be accepted. There were moments when shame tried to plant roots in your soul, whispering that you were unworthy of belonging. Yet even in those valleys of silence, your heart burned with a longing for truth that would not go out. This longing marked you, separating you from the crowd even when you tried to blend in. And though it hurt, it was proof that heaven's hand was already upon your life. With time, the realization began to dawn that this resistance was never random. Systems seemed to form around you, patterns of dismissal, jealousy, or manipulation that echoed in different seasons of your journey. Like Israel wandering in the wilderness, you found yourself moving through deserts not of your own making, carrying promises that felt invisible to everyone else. What looked like exile was in truth a sacred classroom, where you were learning to stand apart and walk with God alone. It was never about punishment but preparation, a setting apart so that your roots could go deeper. Ancient voices knew the struggle well, for David too was overlooked in the field while his brothers stood in line for the crown. You, chosen one, were hidden not because you lacked value, but because your value was too great to be wasted before the appointed time. Looking back now, you can see that there were patterns you once ignored. Doors that slammed shut for no clear reason, friendships that soured when you began to grow, opportunities that dissolved just as they seemed certain. You may have thought these were coincidences, but in truth they were signs that you were walking a different road. Betrayals that once felt like failure were, in reality, revelations of what could not stand with you in destiny. Each strange repetition, each sudden ending, each wall that rose against you carried a secret message. You were not meant to be trapped by what others called success. Like light creeping under a doorframe in a dark room, these patterns exposed what once lived in shadow. And though it unsettled you, it was also the beginning of clarity. There is a deeper truth to this resistance. Your silence was never just emptiness, it was a spiritual frequency. The air seemed to thicken when you chose not to react, and unseen forces scrambled to fill the void with lies, distortions, and confusion. Your refusal to fight on their terms became its own battlefield, one that terrified those who relied on noise and control. Like fog that hides mountains yet cannot erase them, these distortions tried to obscure your vision but could not erase your truth. Every closed door was not a rejection, but a sign that heaven itself was redirecting you. You were not fighting people as much as you were moving against the currents of unseen energies. And that movement marked you as one who carried light into places where shadows had grown comfortable. Inside yourself, the pressure often triggered reactions you didn't understand. At times, you shrank back and chose silence because you feared standing out. At other times, you tried to please, to soften your truth, to keep peace at the expense of your voice. There may have been moments when you rebelled quietly, not outwardly with noise, but inwardly with determination that you would not be broken. These reactions were not failures, but human responses to a spiritual battle you didn't yet have language for. The weight of isolation tempted you to believe you were weak, when in fact you were being tempered like steel. Your quiet tears and sleepless nights were the evidence of your soul wrestling with something far greater than rejection. And in those moments, heaven kept watch even when you thought you were alone. Now comes the turning, chosen one, and with it the clarity you longed for. What you thought was resistance meant only to destroy you was confirmation that you were already carrying something powerful. Their unease was your evidence. Their whispers were your proof. Their attempts to silence you were the announcements of your rising. The very thing they feared most, your unshaken quiet, was the space where God's voice grew louder in you. You never needed to fight with noise, for your presence alone carried prophecy they could not decipher. Heaven has always been shaping you into one whose words, when finally spoken, will pierce through confusion like lightning through clouds. The sword they feared was not forged in argument, but in silence. And now you are beginning to feel its weight in your hand. This is the revelation. You were opposed not because you were weak, but because you were strong. Every barrier, every accusation, every silence forced upon you was a declaration of your crown. They feared you not for what you did, but for who you are. And now you see it clearly. Your silence terrified them because it proved you were listening to something higher. Comment crown if you know this truth has echoed in your own journey. Let your silence remain your shield, for the sound that will come from you in its right time will carry the weight of heaven. And as this chapter closes, know that the next begins with the awakening of your voice, rising like thunder after years of stillness. Every word, every image you receive here is an offering. If you feel this word has touched you today, you can honor it with a sign, right here below with a donation through the Super Thanks button. It is a small gesture, but it opens great doors. Number 3, Heaven's Training Ground. Chosen one, those quiet seasons were not empty. They were your classroom. Habakkuk wrote, "For the vision awaits an appointed time. It will certainly come." Your delays were not denials. They were part of heaven's design to train you in patience, resilience, and wisdom. While they mocked you for being still, you were learning how to move in divine timing. While they bragged about progress, you were being taught to walk when spirit whispered, not when flesh pushed. This is why when you finally move, your steps carry a weight they can't explain. Comment training if your hardest lessons were learned in silence, and share a dream, memory, or challenge that taught you what noise never could. Because every hidden lesson has been preparing you for what is about to unfold before all eyes. There comes a moment, almost imperceptible at first, when your eyes begin to see patterns that were invisible before. A memory you once dismissed suddenly glows with meaning, as if it was planted long ago for this exact moment. Synchronicities that used to feel like coincidence now reveal themselves as coordinates in a divine map. You notice how the very silence that once felt unbearable has been shaping the way you discern truth. It is as though heaven has been holding a mirror before you, waiting until you had the courage to look. What was once confusion is no longer chaos. It has become ordered language. This is the dawning of sight, and you can feel in your bones that the veil has started to thin. Everywhere you look, there are codes waiting to be read, messages hidden in plain view. Numbers repeat until they burn into your awareness, dreams repeat until they demand interpretation, and phrases rise from strangers' lips that feel like prophecies meant only for you. The world itself has become a scroll, and you now realize that each turn of the page carries instruction. Geometry of the unseen begins to take form, not with your intellect but with the deep chamber of your spirit that has always known. Patterns that others walk past in blindness now call your name like sacred mathematics of destiny. The more you notice, the more you recognize that reality has never been silent. It was simply waiting for your ears to awaken. You are not imagining these signals. You are finally decoding them. As this vision sharpens, you realize something within you has been restructured. Your intuition rises like a flame that refuses to die down, even when the winds of doubt try to smother it. Environments that once drained you now feel intolerable, because your spirit refuses to shrink back into cages you have already outgrown. You hear whispers in your body when something is wrong, as though your cells themselves are carrying prophecy. Boundaries no longer feel like walls of fear, but like shields of consecration that guard what heaven has placed in you. You are startled by how different you now feel, yet at the same time you sense you have always been this way. It is not new sight being given, but old sight being restored. As the inner world shifts, the outer world begins to echo it. People who once drew close begin to pull away, their discomfort exposing the change they cannot understand. Others, unexpected and often unfamiliar, appear at the exact moment you need their presence, as if heaven assigned them as living confirmations. Doors that were welded shut begin to rattle loose, while others slam shut without warning, revealing paths you were never meant to walk. Circumstances that once felt random now carry architecture, as though unseen hands are arranging the stage. You realize with awe that the external landscape is bending to the inner transformation. Resistance and opportunity are both sacred signs, different faces of the same divine alignment. Everything within you whispers that the choreography has already been written. In this unfolding, something ancient awakens, a memory that does not belong to this lifetime alone. You recall fragments of dreams that haunted you in childhood, visions of places you have never been, words you could not explain but felt sacred to your soul. The same silence that once tormented you now feels like the language of a father who never stopped speaking. Scriptures long forgotten breathe again, and suddenly you are the one standing inside the parable. It feels like the book of your life has always been written, and you are only now learning to read its ink. What once felt like delay now looks like incubation, for seeds do not vanish when buried, they root. You are remembering what your spirit has always carried. With the unveiling of truth, the path ahead gleams differently. You stop asking for permission to exist because the authority was sealed into your design from the beginning. Destiny no longer feels like something far away. It feels like a garment you are finally wearing after years of carrying it folded in silence. The future is not something you are building from scratch, but something you are reclaiming from forgetfulness. Each step you take feels weighted with eternity, not because it is heavy, but because it is holy. Prophecy rises in your heart uninvited, speaking of things you did not study but somehow know. You realize that forward is not about speed but about alignment. From here, the reclamation begins, and you feel it like a fire returning to your lungs. The voices that told you to sit down no longer carry power, for you remember who gave you your name. What was mocked as weakness reveals itself as training for authority. Where you were silent, you now speak. Where you were bowed, you now rise. Your scars no longer ache with shame, but burn as seals of survival that heaven itself honors. The resistance you once cursed now feels like proof you were never ordinary. With each breath, the ground beneath you begins to acknowledge who you really are. And yet, revelation is never the end, it is always the invitation. Every unveiling is heaven asking you, now that you see, will you walk? What has been revealed is not just information, but initiation into the next chapter. The truth was always waiting until your eyes had the strength to hold it. Chosen one, you were trained in silence so that when the noise came, you would not forget the voice that called you. Comment training, if your hardest lessons were learned in quiet seasons, and share a memory, dream, or moment when silence became your teacher. Because revelation is not for display, it is for movement, and your movement is about to shift what many thought could never change. Stay close, because the next unveiling has already begun. Number 4. The crown revealed. Chosen one, the season of unveiling has arrived. That silent crown that was forged in exile is now ready to be placed upon your head in the open. 1 Kings reminds us that God's voice was not in the fire, nor in the earthquake, but in the gentle whisper. That whisper has now become a roar, and your life will testify. They will have no choice but to witness it. The very ones who doubted you will see light resting upon you, undeniable and unshakable. What they thought was over for you is only beginning. Comment unveiled if you feel the weight of the crown pressing upon you even now, and share how silence shaped your spirit for this moment. Because your silence was never empty. It was the secret forge of heaven, and now the unveiling is unstoppable. The first sound is not thunder, but a whisper that feels older than time itself, brushing against the inner chambers of your soul like a scroll unsealed at the appointed hour. It does not come as new knowledge, but as a recognition of something you always knew yet could never articulate. The hush of that voice awakens forgotten corners of your being, stirring memories buried beneath years of noise and survival. You begin to sense that every exile, every night of silence, was shaping you for this exact unveiling. The weight you feel pressing inward is not heaviness, but coronation, a gentle yet unstoppable placing of what heaven preserved in secret. Elijah heard God not in the fire or the earthquake, but in that still small voice, and it is that same voice that now roars through your remembrance. What you carry is not madness or dream, but divine inheritance returning to claim its rightful place upon your life. There has always been a hidden name inscribed upon your soul, a name never spoken in the chatter of this world, but carried like fire in the marrow of your bones. The world tried to rename you, to call you common, to define you by failure, but none of those words ever fit because they were never yours. Beneath the labels, the ridicule, the false scripts, a truer identity pulsed like a sealed scroll waiting to be opened. You felt it every time you walked into a room and sensed you were not like them, not because you lacked, but because you carried too much light to blend in. This secret name is older than your birth certificate, older than the stories told about you, older even than the wounds you endured. Like the hidden remnant of Israel, preserved when nations fell, your essence remained untouched by the world's verdict. And now the unveiling brings not a new identity, but the remembrance of who you always were. There is a cloak draped around you, invisible to those who mock yet unmistakable to those who carry vision. It is the garment of authority that Joseph's brothers tried to strip away, yet even in tatters it could not erase the favor stitched into his destiny. Your cloak has been your shield in silence, a mantle of recognition that awakened envy in some and reverence in others. There is also a mark upon you, not drawn in ink, but etched in the frequencies of your spirit, discernible only to those who walk by spirit and not by sight. They saw it without knowing what they saw, which is why some ran toward you and others recoiled without reason. Even before you spoke, your energy testified, declaring truths your tongue had not yet learned to shape. This unveiling now makes visible what has always been veiled, the mantle of heaven resting on your shoulders. Long before you were born, a scroll was signed in silence, a contract written not with ink but with eternal fire. In that scroll was an assignment sealed with your name, a mission the earth tried to bury yet could never erase. Every detour was not accident, but calibration, the stars themselves aligning to guard your timing. When delay seemed cruel, it was in fact a hidden safeguard, a seal preventing premature exposure before the crown was forged. You may not remember the vow you made before incarnation, but your spirit has never forgotten. Like Jeremiah, called as a prophet before the womb, your destiny has been preserved from generation to generation. And in this unveiling, that ancient contract is now being read aloud again by heaven itself, declaring that the time of remembrance has come. Do you wonder why people treated you with such confusion? Why their reactions never matched your actions? It is because they were not responding to what you did, but to what you carried. Your presence acted like a mirror, reflecting hidden shadows and unspoken truths in their own souls. To some, that mirror was healing. To others, unbearable exposure. They projected their fears upon you, not realizing your light only revealed what was already inside them. This is why love and hatred, acceptance and rejection, came in such extremes around your life. The unveiling now makes sense of it all. You were never just a person to them, you were a revelation. And revelations rarely leave people comfortable, but they always leave them changed. You now find yourself aligned with archetypes written across ages, echoes of prophets, kings, and warriors who carried assignments larger than their own lifetimes. You are not standing alone in history, you are standing in the current of prophecy. The seer who saw beyond veils, the breaker of chains who led captives out, the guardian who stood at the gate. Their patterns live again in you. What seemed like personal chaos was in fact archetypal initiation, threading you into a cycle far older than your years. Your struggles are not random, they are mythic, placing you in the same lineage of those who bore the fire of heaven in human form. The unveiling now reveals the archetype you embody, not by imitation but by inheritance. And as you step into alignment, you realize prophecy is not behind you, it is rising through you. There is a bloodline stirring within you, a current of divine DNA that cannot be diluted by earthly descent. It is not metaphorical but spiritual, the line of kings and priests that Hebrews spoke of, a royal priesthood chosen for such a time as this. Chosen one, the crown forged in silence is ready to shine. Subscribe if you haven't yet, like this video, and comment "I am chosen" to let this message anchor in your soul. This message may not stay online forever. Download your copy and transcript in the vault, ideal for journaling, inner rituals, and sacred study. The link is in the description below. Please share it with someone who needs to hear this. To all supporting members, thank you. For full prophetic revelations daily, join the membership via the link in the description. Your spiritual path deserves more than fragments. Step into the full light. And if this message moved you deeply, consider tapping the Super Thanks button to support the mission. Every Super Thanks fuels the light we're spreading together. The silence is over. The unveiling has begun.